I'm Corey. You guys came in reading my first book, so this is kind of fun for me to return to because this book came out in 2013. I've had 5 other books out since then. And so returning to the original book and sort of that first time I got published and all of that has been really fun to think about as I was thinking about what to talk about today. So I want to talk just a little bit about like what my process is like, why I started writing, and I'll read a little bit from the book and I'll answer whatever questions you guys might have. So I started writing really young. I started keeping journals when I was 9, and they didn't start out like some great American novel or anything. My journals were like pretty much what you would expect a 9-year-old. I have some excerpts here to give you a little bit of a sense of what that evolution looked like. The only thing that's really remained consistent from the days when I was writing in a journal in my room or in my closet or hiding from my family and sort of what my writing life is like now is just brutal honesty. What I'm really into writing about is like not painting it in a prettier picture than it is, like really trying to show things the way they are and the way they feel, even if those feelings are ugly and even if the way things are is hard. Like that's what I'm interested in as a person and as a writer. And so I think even when I was 8 and 9 and writing in journals, I think that's what I was interested in then. So I have three journal entries for you. The first one is my very first journal entry, which we'll just give away my age if you can do math, which is October 26, 1993. And I called my journal Bethany. I have no idea why. And I said, "Dear Bethany, today I'll talk about Jerry. I'll start at the top and work my way down. He has fiery red hair that makes his face look so handsome. He has such deep eyes that when he looks at me, I could faint. He has a cute nose that is not too big and not too small. His smile is always so cheerful that it always makes me smile when he smiles. He looks so cute I could die. He's nice and funny, and when we worked on the newspaper together, he was always showing off and typing so fast that he made mistakes. Of course, he's one of the smartest in the grade and amazing in math. But guess what? I have competition for him. Catherine Aspinall. She's this tall, curly-haired blonde. She has very short hair and always clashes. She's a jerk. And guess what she did? She was wearing this majorly ugly hat, and Jerry walked by and touched it, and Catherine said, "I'll never wash this hat again." She also told Dana that she thought he was cute. Great news, though. When Dana asked Jerry what he thought of me, he said he liked me as a little more than a friend. I must admit, I'm absolutely in love with Jerry. Love, Corey. And then later that year, December 24th, 1993, Dear Bethany, I can't believe it's almost Christmas, can you? I spent last night at Marika's. It was tons of fun. We had awesome pizza from Pizza Hut. I want to tell you about some of my friends. This is where it gets real honest, guys. Dana. Dana is very mature acting, and she is very smart. She's been my friend for a while, and we were best friends until Lizzie came along. But she's not here anymore, and I'd rather not talk about her now. She makes me sick. Anyway, they became good friends, and Lizzie kind of broke Dana and I apart. Dana's got short, dark hair and just got bangs. Leah. In Kathy's words, Leah is gorgeously gorgeous. She has neat eyes. But Leah often clashes and, doesn't wash or braid her hair. Weston likes her legs. Georgia. Georgia is beautiful. She's also very nice and very funny, but she occasionally talks behind people's backs. Then again, I do too sometimes. Katie. Katie is my all-time favorite friend, but she's got tons of problems. She is almost an 8 on beauty, but she's very slim and graceful. I think she's an above stress level child, but a great friend. I got her an M&M gumball machine for Christmas. Lydia. She wants to be an actress when she grows up, which really upsets me. I kind of thought it was my thing, like I would be an individual, because I'm an individualist. Every time she mentions it, I get all hot and mean feeling. So I stick with these journals for years and years, right? I go all through sort of the rest of elementary school and middle school, and things were really normal for me and my family for a while. And then as I got into high school, my mom started having a lot of problems and started struggling with addiction. And so the journals became even more of a place for me to really get stuff out and really try to understand what was happening. And so I'm going to read you sort of from the end of high school for me, which is, for this entry, I'm going to read you from February 1st, 2001, which is maybe getting closer into like what I got interested in writing about and the types of stories I really wanted to share and talk about with teenagers. So this is when I was a senior in high school. I just found out my mom's an alcoholic. In the next few days, she's going to be going through a detox program. She's been using it as a drug. This is my family. How did this happen? Once upon a time, my family was normal. Now I live a totally foreign life, the kind they write stories about. She has a liver problem. She's going to a psych ward. So where am I? Am I independent of this insanity? Is this why I don't drink? Are things always going to be this insane? When will these things stop? When can I leave them? I don't quite know what to think. I get to leave this all soon. But right now I'm without a mother. I missed out on that normality, that perfect comfort. It's so unfair. Why does this have to be my path? I want something different. If I have to hear one more time that I'm the strong one, and my brother telling me to take care of dad, and dad telling me to take care of my brother, who the hell do I look like? I'm 18 in a week and a half. Not that it's going to matter. They say I'm a trooper, I'm a soldier, I can take care of everyone. Closed doors, open doors, quiet conversations, everything is hidden. How did this ever happen? Love, Corey. So you can see it sort of writing starts for me in this like really fun place and a place to like tell those secrets and talk about guys and talk about which friend I'm mad at and what my day at school was like, and evolved over time into a place, like the only place that for me I felt like I could be super, super honest. And as I've sort of moved into writing books, which took me some time, I originally was an actress, and then I kind of shifted gears and started focusing on writing. And when I did that, I didn't know I wanted to write for teens or for kids. Some of my books are for teens and some are for like 8 to 12. I didn't know that's what was interesting to me, but I sort of started looking back at my journals and remembering like how much was going on in those periods of time and how dishonest a lot of the stories that I was told in that period of time were. And I was like, that's what I want. I want to try to write like really honest stories about that period of time and bits and pieces of things that happened in my actual life, but also expand out and tell other kinds of stories. So let's see if this comes up or not. Maybe not. So anyway, in terms of my process, I start out by, these are just some of the insides of the journals. That's Jerry, by the way. That's me and Jerry. We're in love. So when I first am starting to figure out an idea, I start to make a collage of not even necessarily exactly what's happening in the story, but sometimes the way I want the story to feel. So I'll like rip out things from fashion magazines or other stuff I have lying around the house, postcards, things like that. And I'll start to make sort of a collage on my desk to get a sense of like, when someone picks up this book and reads it, how do I want them to feel? What do I want the vibe of that book to be? And it'll look something like this, and it's a place I can return to, because when you're writing a long book, you sort of get lost along the way, and you're like, why was I even writing this to begin with? Like, why was I interested in this? And something like this is a way to reconnect with why I cared about the story in the first place. And after that is the drafting process. And for me, that process is kind of crazy. I don't know if do you guys like write outlines before you write a paper? Yeah, so a lot of writers do that for a book as well. They'll write like a really detailed outline that's sort of chapter by chapter of what that story is gonna look like, and those are the smart writers. That is not what I do. I just write whatever comes up. So that means for me, I'm writing scenes all out of order, like I'm just writing random scenes with, what would it be like if this character talked to this character, or what would it be like if she went to a party, or what would it be like if she had a bad day at school, like just sort of writing random scenes and then over time piecing them together into an actual story. And when I'm at that place of being ready to piece them together, I write down what's happening in the scenes on these note cards, and I put the note cards on my kitchen table, and I just start moving them around until they start to make sense as like an actual story with a story arc and a beginning, middle, and end, and like a climax in the middle and all of that. So that's a really long process, because for something like I think OCD Love Story is maybe an 80,000 word book. For something like an 80,000 word book, I often end up writing something like 300 or 400,000 words because I do it in this crazy, inefficient, bizarre way. After the drafting process is the revising process, and the first revision I do on my own because no one wants to see that like first draft where it's all crazy. And so for me, I'll print out my book and I'll go through it with little Post-it notes and just start marking every single thing that needs to get shifted or changed. And those can be huge things. Like I'm not talking about like some spelling errors or, you know, little plot points. All these Post-it notes here are like big, massive plot changes, or taking out a whole character, or cutting the first 75 pages, or, you know, switching the whole plot around so that the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end. It's all kinds of like weird stuff you have to do in your head that's like this domino effect. So that's the next stage before I send it off. And then when I'm done with that, we'll see if that pops up eventually, I send it out to my agent and my editor. And my editor is the main person who's giving me all the feedback on my work. And at this point, like, I've usually been working on a book for maybe a year, so you go in pretty confident sending it to an editor. You're feeling like, yeah, this is a book, it needs some work, but it's like in pretty decent shape. And this is usually what I get back, which is like a 9-page epic letter of everything that's wrong with my book. So I open up my email, I'll see something like this. This is an actual one for my last book. See something like that, close my computer, just like start to cry, take off a few days, and then reopen it and start to go through it with a highlighter so that you can actually even see what it is they want me to do. Because it's, again, often these huge, like, idea-based revisions. It's not, oh, this sentence doesn't work, or, you know, make it a little shorter. It's like questions about why the story is being told the way it's being told, and what it is I'm even trying to say, and why these characters do what they're doing, and if they make sense and are believable, and all that kind of stuff. So that's also an incredibly sort of painful part of the process. But after we've done that, and sometimes that's like a one-time thing, and sometimes that's like 4 versions of that and multiple letters. And then there's also parts of the process where they are going through and looking more at like sentence level stuff and making sure the sentences sound right and make sense. But that sort of big work is especially in that initial first like bludgeoning with this editorial letter. And weirdly for me, OCD Love Story was the least crazy, probably. I don't know if it means I'm getting like worse at this, or if I'm just trying to write more and more complicated stuff. But sometimes I'll read, when I'm doing a presentation, I'll read like different versions of the first chapter. And I went back to look at OCD Love Story and see what those different versions would look like. And I was shocked to see that the first chapter had mostly stayed the same from the beginning. So anyway, I'm going to read you a little bit from OCD Love Story, and then I'll answer questions. And if we have time, I also have a Reader's Theater thing, although I'm not sure if we have time for it, but we'll see. Let's see. I'm going to read from the first group therapy that Bia goes to. How many of you guys have had a chance to read some of it or some portion of it? Awesome. Okay, cool. I end up in a room with a girl who has only patches of hair left on her scalp and 3 other twitchy-eyed, hand-wringing teenagers. I'd like to think I stand out as too normal here. At least, that's what I was going for when I got dressed this morning. I borrowed Leisha's J. Crew sweater set and my mom's nice leather boots, and my hair is smoothed and straightened, but not too perfect. As long as I can keep myself from saying anything truly idiotic, maybe I'll get out of group therapy after a few weeks. Ah, Bia, Dr. Pat says, effectively breaking the silence that inevitably follows someone new entering the scene. The room isn't nearly as nice as her office, but her office would be too cramped for even a small group. Hi, Dr. Pat. Come meet the group. This is Jenny, Rudy, Fawn, and Beck. Beck. I'm shaking on the inside now, but the outside of me, the important part, is calm. I look immediately at Beck's hands. They are cracked and dry. They are large and sure. I wouldn't mind holding them again. It's him, the same Beck from the dance, and from the jump in his shoulders, he knows it's me. I nod my head. I repeat the names in my head because I hate the lost feeling of a forgotten name, especially of people I have to tell my deepest, darkest secrets to. Jenny, no hair. Rudy picks his face. Fawn tapping fingers. Beck, good kisser. Hi guys, I say, and they all nod and sputter in response, and I mean, come on, I am so in the wrong group. I am wearing cashmere. I dated a football player. I'm just a little nervous and sad sometimes. I should be in a group of nice girls with tiny problems and pretty hair, or, you know, any hair at all. Dr. Pat's got her don't worry smile on, and Beck is shaking his head a little, so I guess I'm not supposed to acknowledge that we met in the dark a week ago. I'm not big on astrology or fate or God or any of those kinds of things, but it's just full on weird to meet Beck again and in this context. I'd call it a coincidence, and Leisha would probably say it's destiny, but really it's just probability and statistics, plain and simple. There aren't that many therapists in the suburbs of Boston for kids with anxiety disorders, and the whole reason I approached Beck to begin with was because I recognized the fast breathing sound of a panic attack. So here we are. Math at work. Amazing. We left off last week with Jenny talking about how she feels when she looks in the mirror, Dr. Pat says. Not good, I'd imagine. Her head is a patchwork of bald spots. I nod too enthusiastically and smile at Jenny. Have you ever considered shaving it all off? I can't trap the words before they come out. If I didn't know better, I'd think I suffer from some sort of Tourette's autism hybrid, but Dr. Pat insists I can control the impulse to say whatever pops into my head, that it's like a defense mechanism, not a biological imperative. Therapists think everything is a defense mechanism. Just my thinking that in my head right now is a defense mechanism. Now they're all looking at me. Fawn, Rudy, and Jenny have varying degrees of wide-eyed defensiveness. Beck is hiding his mouth, and I can't tell for sure, but I think maybe he is stifling a giggle. I don't know why I can't stop pulling my hair out, Jenny says. She rubs her head, and I think she's trying to pull a piece of her hair out, even here, even now. It feels good in the moment, and then this. She gestures to her head, to the weak roots, the sad attempts to cover up the bald spots. There is absolutely no way I am as screwed up as Jenny. So, do you guys have questions I can answer about the book in particular, about writing, about journaling, about anything I talked about? About being an author? Anyone?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know that from reading Crank by Ellen Hopkins, she wrote about the addiction and poetry waves that she went through with her daughter and her life struggling.
Yeah.
And when I was reading this OCD, I really don't know. I mean, I hear about it, know a little bit about it, but I was wondering, how did you get that feeling of pain and suffering that those students were going through, or those children were going through with that OCD? Did you research a therapist, or did you look up, did you meet somebody, or how did you, it seems so authentic.
Thank you. So I entered writing about OCD because I myself was struggling with anxiety, and when I was first finding out about that, which is a long time ago now, probably in 2009 or 10, I was first sort of trying to figure out what that was when, someone said, like, I think you have an anxiety disorder. So I was looking that up and researching, and I came across a list of anxiety disorders, and there was sort of generalized anxiety and, all the different types of anxiety a person can have. And OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, was on that list. And for whatever reason, I had not known that OCD was an anxiety disorder. In my head, it was like this other thing over there that was for people way different than me and just totally in its own class of struggle. And when I saw it on that list of anxiety disorders, I got really interested in how that translated for someone with OCD. And when I was reading up about, I just, started reading memoirs and stuff about people with OCD, and I was like, whoa, I relate to so much of this. And the behavior, like the way someone copes with their anxiety when they have OCD is different than the way I cope with my anxiety, but the initial feelings, like that initial like fear and panic and all of that kind of stuff that pops up at like the worst moments, that I understood already. And so I sort of used my own anxiety as a way to enter into writing about a different kind of, a different sort of strain of the same stuff I had been going through. And I did do a lot of research. I also, like, early on watched a show which isn't like, academic research, but also got me interested. There was a show called Obsessed, which was sort of like intervention-ish. And they followed people going through therapy who had OCD, and then I started reading a lot about like the science of OCD and exposure therapy, which plays a role in the book, the type of therapy that's considered really, really successful with OCD. And yeah, I just got, once I'm interested in something, I just like go full in. So my whole life was sort of about this for the period of time I was writing it. Who else? Yeah.
Do you feel like mental health issues should be talked more about in books catered to teens?
Big time, yeah. I mean, mental health issues can start at any age, but I think particularly when you're a teenager is when you're when you're first like really connecting those dots between like, oh, I feel this way, and it seems like someone else doesn't feel this way, and like, what does that mean? Like, when you're sort of 9 and 10, like maybe you're not making that connection, but I think when you are a little older and you're able to make that connection, if it's not getting talked about, it's so alienating. Like, for instance, when I was in school, I was in school with this girl named Lulu, and we like weren't friends or anything. I just like knew her around. She was nobody to me, but I had all this stuff going on with my mom, and like no one to talk to about it, and no one, that was not something you were like able to talk about at my school. And recently, last year, I was listening to a show on the radio, and it was featuring a story by this girl, Lulu, who I'd gone to school with. I was like, this is crazy. That's that girl, Lulu. I went to school with her. I know her, like picturing her in my head. And she starts talking about having a sister who was also going into like a mental hospital and struggling with mental health problems. And like she talked in this radio show about the pain of that and the confusion and like all the things that I read in that journal entry that I read you guys, she was talking about in this show. And I was so happy to hear her talking about it, and then so frustrated because I was like, she was 5 feet away from me going through like such a similar experience. But because there was certainly when I was that age, like there was not literature for teens about mental health stuff. You could read like an adult book about mental health, but it wasn't talked about. We weren't reading about it. It wasn't even like on TV. And because of that, like we could never connect. And when I was listening to her all these years later, I was like, oh, it's such a missed opportunity to have been able to like sit down with someone who was going through something so unusual at the same time I was going through it. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And even if it's not for a teenager who's going through it, probably someone in their life is, or they'll encounter someone in their life that is, and the opportunity to just like get to spend some time in a different brain than your own brain, I think is a good exercise for every age person. Yeah, good question. Who else?
I have other questions.
Yeah, please.
Did you ever feel discouraged knowing that you were writing a book that most people couldn't connect with or like relate to?
That's a good question. Did I feel discouraged writing a book that people couldn't connect to? I think when I was writing it, I didn't really think that much about that. When the book came out, a lot of the reviews I got were like really disparaging towards Bia. People would be like, oh, she's so gross, she's so weird, she's so scary, like what a freak. And that was really hard. Like that, I was like, oh, she's someone I sort of relate to and spent all this time with, and I like understand like how tough it is for her to be in the situation she's in, and I was so surprised to hear that it felt so far away from people. But I also heard the flip side of like, oh, I've never thought about OCD, or people who like casually use the term like, I'm being so OCD, I washed my hands like a million times today. You're like, oh, I'm not going to use that phrase anymore now that I understand how serious this is and how hard it is. So you see a little bit of both. Yeah, that's a really good, at the time when I was writing it, I thought like everyone would relate. I was like, we're all anxious. We're all going to totally understand this book about anxiety, even if it's not our anxiety. And it took the book coming out for me to see that there is still a lot of pushback on mental health, and people still want to sort of put something like, well, I'm this way, but that other person's like way over there and so not like me in this whole other category. And yeah, I think you just have to have like more and more and more books that and stories being told that make you see that like everyone's kind of going through the same stuff, even if it looks a little different from person to person. Yeah, here.
The characters in the book, do they relate to the real world, or did you just make them up?
So the characters in the book, do they relate to the real world? My main characters tend to be close in to me. Like I said, I tend to find some sort of like entry point that I can understand, like their heart at least. But in terms of the other characters, not really. In some books, I have the book I wrote after this, Life by Committee, I borrowed like really heavily from my high school experience, to the point where I was like getting nervous that someone would find me on Facebook and be like, "Why'd you write my life?" But in this book, I mostly, like, I didn't have Alicia. Yeah, I didn't have a Beck. Like, those people were not based on anyone specific. Who else? Yeah.
I have a comment, and you kind of answered in the beginning, because I really love the way this book opened. I love that first scene. I love the blackout. I mean, that was so interesting. And you said that was the only thing that really didn't change. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, if I was writing this book, what would be another opening that I could have used? And I was trying to think, sometimes you read a book, it starts with somebody dying, or it starts with a car crash, but it would have been kind of like sad, and it would have been kind of, but this one was kind of interesting because it gave you like an introduction to the bee, and then you knew she was going to meet Beck in the future, and you kind of like were waiting to see how that was going to happen, because it unfolded so nicely. So why do you think that one didn't change in all the editions? I mean, the editors really liked that first introduction, or how do you think that happened?
So I think because a lot of the book is like pretty heavy and you're getting into some like tough stuff, I really wanted, like, as much as the book is about OCD, I also really wanted to write like a romantic book. I wanted it to be about two people finding a relationship and like not fixing each other, but like finding a relationship while also going through something else. So I wanted to open with like the romance part of it, and that you see that there's like some stuff in her brain that's like a little quirky, and you see that like she's experiencing the world in like a very particular way, but that first scene is like ultimately like it's like a more romantic scene. It's about like meeting someone in the dark, and like it's got all that sort of fun to it. So I think it's because of that. I think like starting a book that is darker off on just a really dark note, like there's nowhere to go. And with this, I also really wanted it to be three-dimensional. Like I want Bia to be three-dimensional and her life to be that way. Like not every day is just her walking through having OCD. Like that's not what she's doing day to day. She's like living a whole life with friends and a boyfriend. And she just happens to have this like extra thing, influencing some of her actions. So yeah, I think that's why that first scene didn't change. But it's very strange because I don't have another book that didn't have like a really big change. And the book itself did change a lot. That first scene, the setting was all the same, and most of it was the same, but some of her thoughts were different. I sort of mellowed her out a little bit in later drafts. In earlier drafts, she was further along in her diagnosis. She already knew she had OCD. She'd already accepted it. Like, that part of the struggle changed, but yeah. Who else? Yeah.
Have you ever thought about like turning this into a movie?
This one has not gotten any movie interest. You sort of wait for someone to come to you rather than the other way around. With this book, I actually turned it into a play for my high school, which is, if we had more time, I brought scenes for you guys to read from that. But that was really cool because I was in theater in high school, and I'm still in touch with my drama teacher now. And he had approached me and been like, what do you think? Could we turn this into a play and do it at the school? And that seemed really easy, and I was like, no problem, I'll just like turn it into a play, it'll be really simple. And it turns out so much of this book is in her head that it makes it a little challenging to put it either on stage, or I assume the same thing would happen if you tried to turn it into a movie. Like, so much of how you experience the OCD is in Bia's own brain. So for the play that I ended up writing for them, I made Bia's anxiety and Beck's anxiety their own characters. So like on any given scene, you'd have like there's a scene where they're on a date. They're both sitting at the table, like having a date, and then these characters are like hovering above them, like basically yelling at them. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you eating that? That's dirty, that's bad, don't be like that, you know, don't be weird, you're being weird, she's being weird. So that was sort of how we solved that. I'd be interested to see how that would happen and, you know, what they would do if they turned it into a movie. I would never be able to do that. I know how to write a play, but definitely not a movie. But yeah, so that was sort of, it was cool to have to enter this, like, make the story work in a whole different medium, because things change a lot. I'm sure you guys have like read books and then seen the movie, and you see that like the way you tell that story has to shift and change. Yeah.
Definitely use your past experience and like life pretty much. Did you feel awkward about it, like, or did you feel like, oh, it's okay to write about it?
It goes up and down. I think I've gotten really comfortable with just like owning it. There's something really like exciting. You know, when I was 16, I would not have like stood in front of people and been like, hey, so I struggle with anxiety and my mom's an alcoholic. Like, that would have sounded awful. So there's something cool about feeling like that's fine, like, and being able to stand in front of people and like stand in that truth and be like, this is the way it is, and this is the end. And also being able to explore something deeper in the books and like go into it more, and then also make it different in a book. Like, I don't know that I'd be interested in writing a memoir where it would be like really out there. Like, telling you guys about my real life seems like one thing. Writing like a memoir that's really about me would be a different thing. I wrote about my experience with my mom for a younger audience in a book called Rules for Stealing Stars. And that was the only time it felt like a little bigger. And in that instance, I talked to my mom. I was like, I'm using this experience, I'm talking about, this disease. Can I do that? And when I go and talk to schools, can I tell the students at the schools that this was based on my real life? So that was the only time I had to sort of do some thinking about what it meant to be borrowing from your own life. But for me, it's the only way. Like, I need some sort of entry point. Like, I need to understand something about what a character is going through to spend all that time with them. It's like a 2 or 3 year process often to write a book. So I need to relate to something pretty specific in a character to get there. Yeah.
Was your purpose, like, while writing the book, to bring awareness to OCD and anxiety?
It definitely wasn't my purpose. I would say part of my purpose was in writing a book that showed how when you're struggling with mental health stuff, you are also still just living your life in the world. So it wasn't specific to like OCD and anxiety, but I did want to write about like what it is to still have a crush on someone and like be pursuing a relationship and be like fighting with your friend, and also you happen to have a mental health struggle, like, as opposed to a book that's just about like like being in a treatment program. Like, that was somewhat less interesting to me. I wanted her to be in therapy, but like set at a treatment program would be harder for me. I wanted to see what it was to like be living the same life everyone else is living and also have this sort of extra thing in your head. You had a question? Yeah.
Have you written any more books about mental health?
Yeah, so I have 6 books out right now. The 2 after this one were somewhat less about mental health. One was sort of about like slut shaming and stuff like that, and gender and body issues and things like that. And then the one after that was also was about family and like the different constructions of family. And then the middle grade novel, Rules for Stealing Stars, was about addiction. So that one was also about mental health. And then the book that's coming out in the winter is about like loss. And I've been writing a lot lately about loss and death and things like that. So it's not necessarily as like squarely about mental health, but I think mental health tends to play a role. I mean, mental health kind of plays a role in everything, but particularly with books about loss and the way different people deal with loss differently, I often like touch on mental health there. But this is the only one. This and Rules for Stealing Stars are the ones that are sort of most directly about mental health. Anyone else? No? How are we at for time? Should we do?
Well, what are these scenes you want us to
So I have these scenes. If I can get, I'm not having trouble getting volunteers to ask questions. If I can get volunteers to read a scene, I need 5 volunteers. Or 4. I will read one of the parts. Can I convince anyone? No one? Not even if I will read like one of the main parts.
Ava, are you going to volunteer?
You don't have to stand up. You can stay in your chair.
Where's Donovan?
You'll read?
I'll do it.
You'll read too? Okay, I'll give you that. Can you hand that back to her? You'll do one too? Yes. In the white, right? 2 more. You'll take one? One more, or I can read it. You? Great. All right. So everyone can stay. Oh, one more. Oh, we're out. I was going to do the stage directions. You could switch halfway through or something. Okay. So you should have highlighted. Everyone, quiet for a sec. You guys should have highlighted the parts that's yours. Like I said, this is Bia and Beck's first date. I did gender blind casting, so don't worry about that. And I'll read the stage directions. And like I said, there's Bia and Beck, and then if you have one of the anxiety roles, Bia's anxiety or Beck's anxiety, that means you are just talking to the person whose anxiety you are. You're like talking directly to Bia or to Beck, but no one else can hear you. So it's like someone's interior voice. Okay. Bia and Beck, and Bia's anxiety and Beck's anxiety are at a fancy Italian restaurant. Cloth napkins, awkwardness.
This place okay? This is a date. This is a date. You shouldn't be on a date. It's Beck's and anxiety. They shouldn't be on a date.
I'm underdressed, I think.
Me too.
You look ridiculous. Who do you think you are? You don't fit in here.
A long pause. No one knows what to say. Beck's anxiety and Bia's anxiety pace around the stage.
His shirt is too tight. It's true. You know it's too true. You need to say it if it's true. If you don't tell them the truth, who knows what could happen? You'll be a bad person. Tell him. Come on, tell him the truth.
They sit down. A waiter enters. He brings utensils, water. Both Bia and Beck seem more nervous at the arrival of utensils. They move away from the table a little. Bia's anxiety and Beck's anxiety follow suit.
Is that a knife?
Are those things clean?
What can I get you two?
I'll have the lasagna.
Excellent choice. Chicken and meatballs, please. Wonderful.
The waiter exits.
Do you have to use a knife for lasagna? You can't use that knife.
Bia eyes the utensils again, pinches her arm. There's more silence.
Say something. If you don't say something, I have to use the bathroom.
Washing your hands won't fix those dirty utensils.
Cool.
Beck exits to go to the bathroom with Beck's anxiety.
Even the fork was extra sharp. Remember that article? The woman who kills her husband with a steak knife? She didn't look crazy. She was. Pretty and smiled and had all her teeth, and that could be you.
Bia waves to the waiter who enters.
Yes.
Can you take away this knife?
Of course, I'll grab you a new one. No.
No, I'm good. No knife.
Of course, ma'am.
Waiter exits, taking knife with him. Beck's anxiety return, hands washed.
Are you sure we did this? We did 8 washes?
Looks really good.
You are not using those things. They're covered in germs. Hey, someone get rid of these, please.
Have you seen the waiter?
Oh yeah, he was here a second ago.
Bia points out the waiter. Beck motions him over.
How is everything? Actually, I'm wondering, do you have plastic utensils like for takeout? Yes, well, sure, yes we do. Would you mind grabbing me a set? Absolutely, sir. Plastic? That would be perfect. You can't hurt anyone with plastic.
I'll have a set too, actually, of plastic.
You don't have to do that. I know it's weird.
No, actually, I'd prefer them too. The knife seemed really sharp, and even the fork seems. It is bigger than a usual fork, or pointier.
I'm not sure, ma'am.
Anyway, plastic would be better. Would be great.
Plastic for both of us. Absolutely.
He exits to get the plastic utensils.
The poor waiter, he has no idea what is going on, and he's so polite. He's staying all calm and polite, and meanwhile, we're all
freaking out about weird stuff that no one else even thinks about.
What's that like, do you think?
Was it like not having a constant stream of worry in your brain all the time?
Yeah, do people really walk around without all those thoughts spinning around? Do they get like a lot more done than us? Is it like being on a constant vacation, or are they just really stupid?
We don't want to be one of those people she's talking about anyway. The vacation-y people, those people probably have all kinds of horrible things happen to them, and they have to be surprised by it. We're prepared. It's a good thing. Don't listen to this girl.
I'm going to wash my hands again, and then we're going to eat, I promise.
I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere.
Bia and Beck grin at each other. Beck exits. Bia leans back in her chair, happy, lights down. Good job, guys. Thanks for reading that. So that's a little bit from the play I ended up working. And hopefully when you read it, you get what worked so well about the play was that you kind of could get a sense of like that constant stream of noise in your head of someone struggling with anxiety and specifically of OCD. So I like reading that one because I think it gives you a little bit of a sense of like how annoying it is to get through your day when you have that voice going on. So thank you guys. Excellent work. You can pass them back up. And if there's any last questions or anything, I'm happy to answer. No? Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate coming here and
Thank Victoria and Haydu for putting this meeting together.
thank you.